My diesel would do it for less. Drops to 173 kilometers just by having the AC on. 78%. I found the range very truthful. I averaged 16.4 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. Hello and welcome back to the DoneDeal YouTube channel. Beside me here we've got MG's new ZS. It's a fully electric SUV and we've actually already done a first impressions or first drive video of this. So if you want to learn about the new tech and the improvements from its predecessor, then you can hit the link up there. However, in this video we're going to focus in on living with an electric car. What's it like? Is the range really as stressful as you think it might be and as sometimes you hear? How long does it take to charge? And answer just all the obvious questions that some people might have, particularly if they're thinking of going from an ICE car to a fully electric. So make sure to subscribe, and if you'd like to search for electric cars for sale in Ireland, we've got over 1,000 trusted dealerships around the country. You can hit the link up there. Now let's talk about some of the stats. Quickly before we get into the stats, I just want to be very clear that this is going to be documenting how I find it. I'm not going to be nursing my driving and driving as economically as possible. In fact, I'm going to drive it exactly like I'm going to drive a petrol car. I'm also going to be talking about charging it, and this is going to be interesting because I live in an apartment and there's nowhere to charge it there. So I'm going to be using the public infrastructure if I need it. And another key thing is that it is February in Ireland, so it's quite cold, which does have a bit of a negative effect on battery and range. I just wanted to make that very clear. Now let's get into the stats. So first up, there's a 72.6 kilowatt hour battery in this car. Now that claimed should have about 440 kilometers, but that's in optimum conditions. So let's see what it's at when I've collected it and how much range it's estimating we'll have. So the next thing to do is to turn the MG on and figure out the stats that we're actually being presented with. Now, truth be told, I collected the car yesterday, I reset everything and I've been driving it for about 24 hours. But we're starting the video of living with right now, and that's with 83%. And that in normal mode is giving us about 337 kilometers. Now, I'm really good at maths and I definitely didn't calculate this before I began recording, but that means we should get about 405 kilometers to a full tank. However, this is crucial and we're going to be talking about all these things that affect the range. If I change the mode to sport, I have 320 kilometers. But when I change it all the way down to eco, I've got 354 kilometer range. So the driving mode is also going to make a big difference. So anyway, that is the stats that we are given at the start of the week, and we'll see how that progresses throughout. Okay, so I have just embarked on my first journey. Now, over the course of the next week, I'm not going to bore you with every single drive that I go on. I might highlight the interesting ones, whether they're a long motorway drive or into the city centre, because these all affect the range and kind of the consumption, just like they do in a petrol or a diesel car. However, what I will try and do is every single day answer at least one very important question to do with electric cars. And so the first one that I'm going to answer is, overnight, do they lose range? You hear about it. I've experienced it in some cars and not in others. Today's particularly interesting because it is only 9 degrees out, so should potentially lose a little bit of battery overnight. I don't know, we'll find out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click my fingers when I get home and I'm parking up the car for the night. We'll check in to see what the range is then, and then we'll check it again tomorrow morning. And just like that, I'm home. So the screens in front of me are telling me that I've got 78% battery and 313 kilometer range. So let's see what it's like in the morning. I left the MG overnight, and when I went out to the car in the morning, I had a little bit of a surprise. Oh my, it is a nasty day out there. Now, it's been about 18 hours, so I'm going to turn it on. I reckon 1 or 2%, it is nasty. We have 78%, 313 kilometers. So at less than 10 degrees for 18 hours, the MG ZS didn't lose any. I'm actually staggered. I genuinely thought we might lose maybe 1% and maybe up to 10 kilometers. It's a storm out there and it's not warm either. Anyway, I now have a drive into the city centre, and between me and there it's all city driving, and that's going to be interesting because generally speaking electric cars perform best around the city. They've got regenerative braking and a few other things that really make it kind of the optimum conditions. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about when I get home how many kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers I use in that journey, and then tomorrow I've actually got a motorway journey and we'll be able to kind of compare how much less efficient is an electric car on a motorway versus around the city. So we're going to drive in now and we'll check back in when we get back. Okay, so we're back at base camp now, and in total you'll see the stats on the screen. I travelled 26.8 kilometers. It took about an hour and 20 minutes, and my average speed was 20 kilometers per hour. But the really interesting thing here is that I still have 72% battery, and I also have 291 kilometer range. So even though I traveled the guts of 27 kilometers, I didn't use that in range. And the reason for this is because around the city, the MG was much more efficient. Now there's a figure over here on the right hand side, which is kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. Now this is the figure we're going to be using today to compare against tomorrow on the motorway. So I averaged 16.4 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. So that's how much I'm using every 100 kilometers. That is city driving, and these are really ideal around the city. Tomorrow is going to be very interesting, and we're going to be able to compare that kilowatt hour per 100 kilometer figure, which is the one we're looking for. So I'll touch base tomorrow when we're on our motorway drive. So I'm about 50 or 60 kilometers into my motorway journey, and it has to be said it's not as efficient. I'm getting a little bit over 22 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. I've been sticking to the speed limit and actually going up to 120 kilometers per hour when it allows me. And to be fair, it would be the same in a diesel or petrol car. Your efficiency drops once you go over 100 kilometers per hour. So we're actually going to do a test, and on my way home I'm going to reduce my speed. I'm going to stick to 80 kilometers per hour the whole way home. It's going to be quite boring, but it'll be interesting to see what it does to that figure. On my way home, I dropped my speed to about 80 kilometers per hour, and I did see a big increase in my efficiency. I was actually getting about 18 or 19 kilowatts per 100 kilometers. Now that said, it's not that enjoyable to drive at that speed, and what's more is in a diesel or petrol car, you'll see the same results. Basically, if you slow it down 20 or 30 kilometers per hour on the motorway, the more efficient a car is. I'm on my way home and I've pulled up to Circle K, and I see that they've got an Ionity fast charger. So there's 5 of these locations around the country, and truth be told, I've never used one for a number of reasons. The first being is I've never really needed to. As long as I kind of charge up in Dublin, I haven't used them, but also they're very expensive. So this is something to bear in mind. I think you pay about 70 cents per kilowatt hour. So anyway, I'm going to pull up just for 10 or 15 minutes. I'm going to go in and I'm going to grab a coffee, and we'll see how much range we gain. Okay, so I've just plugged it in, and it's pretty easy. You don't need a card or anything. You just need the app. You say what charger you're at and then you authorize it. In terms of my current output, I'm getting 42 kilowatts. Now this car is able to charge at 72 kilowatts, but it's all to do with where your battery is, because I have about 48% when I arrived here. So my battery doesn't really need it. So the charging curve is affected there. Whereas if I only had, let's say, below 10%, I might be getting a little bit of a faster charge. Anyway, I'm gonna leave it there. I'm gonna run in, I'm gonna grab myself a coffee, and we'll see where we're at in about 15 minutes. I don't actually need this charge. I'm just doing it more out of kind of in the interest of science. Right, so I'm just after finishing my charging session. I stayed for 23 minutes. I ended up taking my time getting a sandwich. I gained just shy of 18 kilowatt hours. Now off yesterday's test, that means I gained about 100 kilometers of range, and that cost me €13. And I know you're thinking, My diesel would do it for less, and you're dead right, but you can't get diesel at home, but you can get electricity at home. So at home I could probably have done a slower charge at a much cheaper rate, probably nearly 10% of the cost of that. Ionity is really kind of a luxury spend when it comes to electric cars. You're not going to be using it very frequently, and that's one thing I would urge is, if you're buying an electric car, make sure you have a way to charge it at home, because it's nearly impossible. It's not impossible, I do it all the time, but it's just a lot easier because every day you start with a full charge. You don't have to rely on expensive chargers. But it's just an interesting experiment, and to be fair to Ionity, the way it works, the setup, it all works very, very well. So hats off to them. It's just a little bit expensive. So one electric car hack that I've learned over the years is to do with AC. So right now my air conditioning is off and my range is 182 kilometers. Now watch what happens when I turn it on. It drops to 173 kilometers just by having the AC on. And I know you're thinking this is electric cars, this is the problem, but believe it or not, it's the same on a diesel or petrol. You just notice it more in an electric car because you're always keeping an eye on that range. And because realistically, heat and cool air cost fuel. That's just how they're created. But what I do want to show is when I turn that back off and my range goes back up to 182 kilometers, watch what happens when I turn the heated seat on. Nothing. Heated seats are actually a more efficient way of warming yourself up in the car. So you will find a lot of electric cars come standard with heated seats, and that's to kind of save on power. Now personally, sitting with a warm bum but a cold everything else isn't ideal, so I actually use the AC for the vast majority of this week. But if you're really trying to protect that range, it's a good little tip. Right, so another day for the ducks out there. I was planning to finish this video outside the car, but you can probably hear the rain. Not really feasible today. But how have I found it living with it for a week, particularly without a home charger? My first thing I'd say is, if you're buying an electric car, really don't consider it without a home charger. If you do live in an apartment like me, I have seen now some of the new apartments are actually popping up and they've got electric car chargers in them. But apparently you can also speak to your landlord or your management company and they might be able to install them for you. So it's just one thing to bear in mind. But what I'll say is, after having it for a week, even without the home charger, I kind of realised I don't really need one necessarily. It would take some of the stress and anxiety out of it, but with a range of 400 kilometers plus, how often do we really do more than that? Now, one thing I have noticed myself doing, and I tried my best not to suffer from range anxiety, but I liked to keep it over 40% charge, and the reason was, just in case something pops up and I have to drive somewhere a little bit further. Definitely fast chargers, the Ionities. I wouldn't say they're a rip-off because they can save you, but they are very pricey, and I would avoid using them on a day-to-day basis. And I don't want to throw a figure out for how much it costs to charge at home, but you're probably talking, if you set the timer for the night time using a night rate, it's going to be below €5. So when it comes to charging at home, that's really where it does make a difference. And other than that, it's been fine. The MG itself has been brilliant. I've found the range very truthful. Often these numbers can get hyperbolized. When it says it's got 180 kilometers, it will generally speaking do that, which is pretty good. It's really nice in here to sit in. It's definitely a step up from its predecessor. The panoramic roof really brightens it up, and just as a whole, it's quite nice to live with. It's a nice size as well. You can park it pretty easily. The 360-degree camera helps quite a lot. Anyway, if you would like to know a little bit more about kind of electric car 101, we have done a video, so it talks about everything from the grants that are available to you when you're buying it to different things that will affect your charge. So if you want to look at that, hit the link up there. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and lastly, if you'd like to search for new electric cars for sale, also hit the link on the top of the screen. We've got over 1,000 trusted dealers nationwide, so hopefully they can help you get into your new car and teach you a little bit more about going electric potentially. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.